the groundbreaking ceremony for a long-term care home in Eastern Ontario, a municipal home. So that's the Prescott and Russell residence. And not too long ago, that project was in a very similar stage as the two projects with the county in terms of being at the initiation phase, looking at a concept, getting ready to move forward with, I'll say, the big steps in terms of design development, obtaining financing, and getting a shovel in the ground. So I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to work alongside your organization and a really capable team that we put forward in our proposal to make this project a reality for the county. As a designated project manager, I just wanted to reassure everyone today that I would be your point of contact throughout the entire project to successfully deliver both projects. And so that means that I will be supported by a team, as Jane mentioned, looking at financial advisory services. And so that will be helping develop the business case and doing the updates to the financial model and the pro forma throughout the project. I will be working with Nikki, who will be the lead for furniture and equipment. You'll see some of her involvement during the upfront phases, but a lot more of the work done during the design development and once the furniture and equipment gets procured. So you'll see her effort ramp up throughout more of the design development phase of the project. And then last but not least is the operational readiness piece. So focused around occupancy planning, move management, and operational readiness. So you'll see a lot of this effort ramp up over the last 12 months prior to occupancy, but this is a critical portion to make sure that once the building is physically built, that as an organization, both homes are ready to move in and to operate successfully from day one. So we're really thrilled to have this team together that has all the resources necessary to successfully deliver this project from its current stage all the way through to the first resident date during occupancy. One of the key features of our proposal was identifying or recognizing, based on our understanding, that Rockwood Terrace and Grey Gables are two separate, unique projects that are going to require a unique approach to successfully manage. And so you will note that in our preliminary work plan and schedule, where we would be having a separate project plan for each of these projects, recognizing the nuances with regards to the site, with regards to the opportunities, and managing them very separately. We have also recognized and allowed for efficiencies where possible with regards to procurement. So similar as the procurement for the project manager, we would anticipate that similar efficiencies may be gained with the procurement of the prime consultant and the pre-qualification of general contractors. And so this is one example of where we would work closely with your team and the procurement group to look at how best to move forward with the RFP, but we'd see a tremendous opportunity and synergies that can be gained by using a common approach for the prime consultant and the pre-qualification for both of these projects. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the proposed work plan, which is preliminary, that we included in our proposal based on our understanding. So there's an initial period of 3 months, which is the initiation and planning phase. And I'm going to come back to this because this really talks about what we want to do to get started and hit the ground running from day one. So I'm going to get back to a little bit more details about what will be included in that phase. The main deliverable at the end of the initiation and planning phase would be to retain a prime consultant and move straight into the design development activities. So after the 3 months for initiation and planning, there would be a 16-month period for design development and tendering. What can be expected during this period is the two main technical submissions that will go to the ministry. So those are the preliminary plans followed by the working drawing to get the necessary approval to tender. And last but not least, the approval to construct for both of the projects. We've included for a 24-month period for construction and commissioning, and then a 3-month period for closeout. So during closeout, you can think of this as wrapping up the deficiencies. There will be a heightened focus on the move management and the occupancy planning activities, making sure that both homes are ready for success on day one when the first residents go through the doors. In terms of immediate next steps, our focus over the 3-month period, as I mentioned, will be to retain a prime consultant to move into the design development activities. But we spend a lot of time upfront making sure that we understand the why of the project before going too fast into the how. And so that being said, we don't have too much time because we still have a 3-month period to complete this phase. But what we would be doing immediately is having a kickoff meeting and a planning workshop. So this is going to allow us to understand the different facets and the different success criteria for each of these unique projects and establishing baselines. So baselines in terms of schedule, in terms of cost, in terms of risk, that will be summarized in a comprehensive project plan or a roadmap to successfully deliver both of these projects. We're going to be reviewing historical documentation available, so we understand that there are existing studies that are happening for both sites. If we look at Rockwood Terrace, we understand that there is a large parcel of land, approximately 32 acres, with a concept to develop a campus. So the results of that study will be critical to inform the next steps in terms of the long-term care development piece, as well as Grey Gables looking at the options for what will be done with the existing building. So this will dovetail with ongoing works and studies that are done and will be essential to informing the next steps for our progression. So I talked about establishing the baselines, putting forward the project plan. We're also going to spend some time to understand, looking ahead, what are the key requirements and studies to work through the authorities having jurisdictions in the municipal process, more specifically site plan approval. So if we think about right now being in May and looking at 3 months for initiation and planning, we don't want to wait too long to start initiating some of these studies when we're in the design development process and closer to winter months where it may not be favorable to do some of these studies. So as part of our ongoing due diligence and review, we want to identify any gaps as early as possible to then proceed with the procurement of any specialty consultants or studies and essentially de-risk the project. And so in a nutshell, that is our approach, our work plan, and our methodology for the project, how we've broken it out over the next few months. I'd love to just take a pause at this stage and see if you have any questions about what I've talked about this morning or about our proposal. We'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
Thanks so much, Andrew. I have a couple of questions, but from the committee, does anyone want to ask a question right now? Good. Okay. Andrew, one of the, and everyone from Colliers, one of the things I think we're all conscious of right now is just the time that we're in, the place that we're in, the background that goes with the kind of project that we're trying to do here. I know that you've worked closely with Advantage Ontario, and I'm sure you've looked at Justice Morocco's report, which does kind of make some mention of design and that. Do you want to make any comment about both your relationship with working with the Ministry of Long-Term Care, as well where you think the design guidelines are going, and if there's things that we should be thinking about or planning for in this
Absolutely.
project?
I think that's a fantastic question, and in a way, with what has transpired over the last year, it has given a lot to think about for any organization who's undergoing redevelopment. About we're building homes that are going to serve communities for decades to come. So it's a good time to pause and think about what can be done differently. So there's two important pieces to understand. One is looking at how the standards are evolving with regards to the long-term care design manual. What are best practices out there, and any anticipated changes in the manual. Based on what we are seeing right now, there are a lot of organizations who are looking to go beyond and exceed what the long-term care design manual requires, which is a very, I'll call it, prescriptive document in terms of long-term care redevelopment. The funding hasn't quite caught up, and so that is one of the realities right now, that any organization or operator who wants to exceed has to find additional sources of funding to do so. Based on what I am seeing right now and the requirement to redevelop by 2025, I do not believe these standards would be changing anytime soon, as well as the associated funding to allow the county to capitalize on that. But that being said, as part of the functional programming and looking at the statements of requirements, I think it's a perfect time to really look at what would be and I'll call it quote unquote a base case versus what are some features that could be included and what is the cost and benefits associated with them. So I see that very much as part of establishing the baselines, understanding what options may be there and what the costing would be before diving too far into the working drawings and the design development phase. And if I can just add a little more about that, there has been a tremendous amount of discussion in terms of changes that can be made to the design. So in terms of space, in terms of mechanical systems, spaces to allow for easier physical distancing, spaces to allow, for example, for visitors to go to homes, spaces for PPE storage. So there's a lot of discussions and lots of areas that have been identified to improve on the current design given the pandemic. And we are at the forefront of those discussions. We've worked with several design teams who are well versed in this and are happy to provide this input throughout the process.
That's great to hear. Thanks so much, Andrew. We'll go back to the committee. Any other follow-up from anyone in the committee?
Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this is like really early to be talking about this, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. I was pleased to see that the experience behind this company is thorough. The experience I have in a really small scale, like an $8 million project, is you have these meetings every other week with committee, and your change orders start to build up, and you get into 100, you get into 200, and halfway through the project, your contingency is gone. 3/4 of the way through the project, it's like, what is going on here? These change orders should never have happened in the first place. And then at the end, your $8 million project is now $8.7 million, and everyone around the committee table is saying what just happened. So I just want you to talk about your past experiences, your track record, and how we get away from dealing with issues like this.
Those are great questions, and I can tell you that every single one of our projects and clients that we work on have the exact same concern. So I'm going to talk about 2 strategies that we put in place and that we proactively manage on your behalf. So one is what are the reasons of these changes? So I just want to talk broadly about the types of changes we see. Some of them can be authorities having jurisdiction, which are, to be honest, a little bit more difficult to deal with, but we still have ways to proactively work through them. Others can be owner requested changes. So that means we're in construction. The owner says, well, you know what? I want this instead. So it's a more costly change to make during the construction period. We try to avoid these as much as possible without increasing the budget to accommodate those changes. The ones where we have the biggest ability to control and to really be tough on the design teams is when it comes to errors and omissions and design coordination changes. The biggest means to mitigate that is to make sure that the design packages are as complete as possible, as coordinated as possible, so that minimizes any change that will happen during the construction period. And so right now there is modeling that's available, 3D modeling. There's clash detection, different technologies that design teams are using to try and identify as many of these potential conflicts as possible and minimize them. So that's one way to deal with it. We also have, and this wasn't something that we had noted in our, or it may be, it's not in our base scope right now, but we have another process that's called a bid document review. And so what that means is before the documents actually go out to the market, it's tested essentially by builders or constructors or different trades that would be doing the work to look for any gaps and uncover them before the project goes out for tender. So that's a great tool of how those errors and omission and design coordination changes can be minimized. The very last point I want to add is that the post-contract contingency needs to be carefully selected in response to the risk of the project. And so if we are expecting, and I don't know the details yet, if we are expecting conditions below the ground that are there's a lot of unknowns, then, two ways to mitigate that is what extra due diligence could we do to de-risk it? Or what is the appropriate contingency to set for the project? And so these are, I'm giving you a sense of 3 or 4 different approaches that we use to carefully manage that. And it's something that we have our eye on throughout the project.
Thanks, Andrew. Mr. Warden, I believe I've seen your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is really for Mr. Rodriguez. Every time we buy a TV, we're really concerned that, we may be buying a TV that in 6 months is going to be missing some element that will be really, really important, in the next, for the next several years. And we've got that TV that's obsolete, a few weeks after we buy it. We're in a really unique period of time right now. A lot of attention on long-term care. I think it's reasonable to predict that changes afoot. There's going to be changes. You talked about this long-term care design manual, and I guess, is it reasonable to predict that there's going to be some change to that manual? You also mentioned that the funding hasn't caught up. So potentially there could be some changes in funding formula and whatnot. And at the same time, we're in the process. So my concern is we build and we launch, and as soon as we launch, we realize that the rules have changed. The design recommendations are different. And we've got this building that's, not quite as futuristic as it should be. So I guess my real question is, to what extent can we, predict things that are going to be fairly reasonable? So, for example, can we say it's highly likely that ward type of arrangement will no longer be the thing moving into the future? Is it reasonably likely that they would even say that even shared rooms, that maybe moving forward, all rooms should be, single rooms? I just don't know. I don't have enough experience, but knowing that change is coming, are we going to be able to reasonably predict some of those changes and perhaps put that into our design?
So that's a wonderful question, and I think, to be completely honest, no one really right now would have a definitive answer from a timeline perspective. What I can say is the county requires redevelopment prior to 2025, and there's a pretty tight timeline in terms of next sequence of steps to achieve that requires starting immediately. I can also say that the county is not unique in this position, in that there are several other operators throughout the province that are also looking to redevelop or add beds, and who are in a similar position of what standard to adhere to. Based on everything we know at the moment, I am not anticipating any changes to those standards between now and the time these projects would be built. But I think the conversation is constantly changing and evolving. So one way to deal with this is, as Kim had mentioned, we are very closely involved with Advantage Ontario through the ministry, through our discussions with the assigned project managers to be up to speed in terms of any changes, any anticipated changes that could impact the project. And so while it's something that we are continually scanning for in the environment, I think the decision today has to be based on what are the existing fundings, what are the standards, and identifying what are some opportunities if there is a change that we can capitalize on. So in essence, it's like you're developing a scope ladder. How do we move the project forward based on what we know today? But if there's any changes, where are the areas we're going to prioritize so we can act quickly?
If I can just add to what Andrew's saying, and I'm sorry, because Jennifer Cornell, our Director of Long-Term Care, is actually presenting at Advantage Conference this morning, which is why she's not with us. But in my conversations with Jen, it's about, given that we don't have, an ironclad, I hate to use that word anymore, but approach to what this needs to do, then can we then err on the side of allowing ourselves some flexibility. Like maybe those dining spaces allow for both larger as well as much smaller groups and that sort of thing. But this is where I would have to defer to our experts, but that's kind of what we've tossed around, so that we, you know, where we can, let's leave ourselves some opportunities to be able to make adjustments to the footprint or the layout of a space to meet whatever the situation is that we're facing. Does that seem reasonable, Andrew? Yeah.
Yeah, there was one item that I was going to add in there as well that we've done on projects, is even looking at the mix of beds based on the demand, based on the economics, putting in some provisions or design features to allow for some potential conversion in the future. Mm-hmm. You know, I think there's never an appetite after a massive capital project is redeveloped to then go back into doing some renovations. But this is just one option that's available to give that flexibility without necessarily being able to predict today what the demand may be accurately in 20 or 30 years. And you're putting in that base infrastructure to facilitate if needed.
Thank you, Andrew. Brian, I believe you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Andrew, just to follow up from my earlier point, when we get to the contractor stage, can you still have penalty clauses with your contractors, or do you just end up without anyone bidding on the job if that's the route you take?
Well, what we strongly recommend in this case is a pre-qualification process, so that you end up with a list of 3 to 5 general contractors who have the capability, who have the experience and track record to deliver a project of similar size and complexity. So that's the first piece. And then afterwards, going out for tender after they've been pre-qualified, it would be based on your lowest compliant bid at that stage. In terms of penalties, are you referring to like liquidated damages?
Well, just to have some control of the contractor, like if he's not showing up for 5 days in a row and finish another job, or like, how do you have control over the contractor when things like that happen?
Yeah, so we have we have a strong team to manage the general contractors, starting with pre-qualifying. So that process makes sure that not just any general contractor can bid on the job. They submit the lowest bid, and then they have no experience or capability. We go through the process to make sure that they are naming a strong project manager, a very strong site superintendent, and we go through the reference checks. So we do our due diligence to make sure that it's not just a resume, but we've heard through experiences throughout the project. How do they communicate? Have there been a lot of changes? Were they quick in addressing deficiencies throughout the closeout stage of the project? And so that's part of the rigor and due diligence that is done while pre-qualifying a general contractor. Once the general contractor is brought on board, we start off with a kickoff meeting. There are bi-weekly construction meetings, so we'll be actively on the site to review progress against the baseline. And if we do see any issues that require correction, our approach is to identify them as early as possible and hold the contractor accountable so they can correct them. So it's a very proactive approach where we are involved in the front end to make sure that whoever can bid on this project has the capability and experience.
We also have sample supplementary conditions that we have certain parameters and requirements that they need to meet on timelines, what they need to submit on a monthly basis. We ask for updates to the master schedules, as well as from a change order process. We make sure that there's clear understanding of the markups that can be applied to different changes as well. So we can provide those to the county, that they can review those with their legal team to see what can be applicable to the project.
Okay, thanks, Jane. And finally, last question, I promise. The only thing that makes me nervous in this report, project closeout. And I highlighted deficiency corrections. Can you just talk about that? Like, tell me that's not a really big deal.
Yeah, so deficiency correction is really making sure that before your residents move in, you're not going to have your contractor walking in and out of the resident rooms and working on some final items that could be integrated as part of the construction. So our approach with the construction scheduling will be to close out as much as possible the deficiencies and incomplete work throughout the project. So by the time you reach substantial completion, the deficiencies left will be minor in nature. That being said, there are always items that need to be closed out. And so we will work to expedite that as quickly as possible so that once your residents enter the home, there will be very limited deficiencies to close out at that stage.
If I could, I'd like to add to that. One of the strategies we use is contractors are notorious for following the money. So at the end of a project, there's obviously a lien holdback, which is really money held in trust, and legally after 45 days, you as the owner must pay that out. We add to that a deficiency holdback. So we are holding money in abeyance to pay them to make sure that is going to motivate and drive them to finish their deficiencies quicker so that they get access to that specific deficiency holdback money that we put in the contract.
Thank you, Gary. Just so you guys all know, I have been a commercial general contractor for over 40 years. So I'm very familiar with what you're doing and really appreciate your experience that you're showing. A question I have for Andrew, and I assume you can hear me?
Yeah.
The question I have for you, Andrew, is one thing on a project like this is extremely important. As-built drawings and documentation towards the end of the project, extremely important. I assume you have a great handle on that?
Absolutely, and just to add to echo Gary's comments, that's another thing that we put a value amount in the tender document that's quite substantial. And so there is a high incentive to get the as-built, to get the record drawings, as well as your operations and maintenance manuals that staff will highly depend on to operate in the new building. So that's another great example of where there is a holdback associated with it.
Thanks, Andrew. And a question again for, I guess, Andrew is, maybe as the contractor in me, it's good to see you're pre-qualifying the generals. Would you go as far as to having bid deposit for the subtrades? I'm thinking electrical, mechanical.
We could. We would. Those are definitely very important trades, especially looking at the mechanical and electrical systems for a building of this nature and this type. We would. It's not something that we have done this commonly in healthcare projects, but it's not a one-shoe-fits-all approach. So it's something we would have to look at in more details in terms of the benefits and risks. But I can say we commonly do this in healthcare projects.
Yeah, we took a look at that when we were talking about our approach and methodology. From a pre-qualification perspective, general contractors can kind of come from wherever, but your mechanical and electrical trades might be more local. And because of the fact that you have two projects that are very close proximity that are going to have an overlap on their construction period, then we have suggested that we would look at pre-qualifying the mechanical and electrical as well to ensure that those trades have the capacity to be able to support both projects.
Good, thank you. Does the committee have any questions of our guest? Christine, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly I've been following the discussion. So much of my question has already been answered, but really what I'm looking for is, or what I'm interested in is the best practices in terms of mitigating any potential delay, and whether that's during the construction period or just the design or any phase that we have during these two projects. So although you've spoken to a lot of I guess, preemptive approaches, is there anything additional that you could respond to in terms of mitigating any risks of delay for both projects? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. And as part of establishing our baselines for schedule, we are looking at, so I'll break it down into two pieces. We'll start off by talking about the design. The bigger risk from a timing perspective there would be with regards to ministry approvals to proceed with the design development as well as financing. And so those are, I'd say, just two of the broadest risks that we see over there. In terms of what our lessons learned and what we would do to mitigate is working closely with the ministry assigned project manager. We have a very good understanding as to the timeline for these submissions, the reviews, what they are looking for, the completeness of the packages. And so we can control that by minimizing the back and forth in the questions. And that's one of the tools that we have to mitigate the risk. If there is an extended period where the ministry is reviewing the file, we can also work with you to look at what are some options available to keep the project moving forward. It is, of course, going to be based on your organization's risk tolerance, but it is an option available to keep the project moving forward and to avoid the delays and the knock-on effects that would lead to tendering and construction. And so we do have experience on how to work around in both the design phase as well as the construction phase. We also make sure that when we establish the schedules that they are realistic baselines and that it has sufficient contingency from not only a dollar standpoint. We talked about Brian's comment about during construction and post-contract contingency, but also from a schedule perspective. So those are just a few examples of our approach and how we would proactively mitigate.
If I could just add to that, one of the tools that we also use during construction, and we described it in our proposal, is what we call earned value management. So we will, in the tender documents, request the general contractor who will be scheduling out the work in their tender. They'll tell us how they plan to sequence the work. They can also therefore tell us how they intend that they're going to spend their money once they are awarded the contract, essentially a cash flow. Earned value management is it's a tool we use where we can, on every draw, we can manage against what their planned spend was going to be on the project. And it can give us early indications of if they are falling behind on where they had intended to be spending to stay on track with the schedule. And then we can go in and start to work with them to try to get them back on track if in fact that does happen. So it's an excellent tool above and beyond, being in site meetings where a contractor says, yeah, I'm a couple days behind, but I'll make it up. And then 2 weeks later, yeah, I'm a couple days behind, but I think I'll make it up. We've all kind of learned and lived with that. Earned value management is a factual representation of, are you staying on the schedule that you had planned? Because if you're not spending the money you had spent, then the work isn't getting done. So it's a great tool that gives us an early indication that we can then intercept and jump in quickly and find a way to get back on track if we have found we've been falling behind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, go ahead.
I know I promised. I just have one more. Christine reminded me of the big three. This is just a comment, but the big three meaning quality construction, being on time, and being on budget. And I just wanted to say that, both these communities, Markdale and Durham, they're very small communities. So what's ever being said on one side of the community at 9 o'clock in the morning is being talked about at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the other side of the community. So hopefully when this is all said and done, the communities aren't talking about, how late the project was or how much over budget it was, and instead just how proud we are of this. And I think that's what our goal is. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Kim, last comments. Well,
Scott.
Scott, go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just through you, a question to Andrew, just around I know we're at the very early stages of a very complex project, but could you just help me with the overall general timelines that you're expecting from shovels in the ground to a completion date? And are you confident that we'll be able to meet the 2025 deadline?
Yeah, so I'll go over the timelines again in just a broad sense. And so to answer your first question, yes, we are very confident that it can be delivered by 2025. The timeline that's proposed over here is very much in line with other active long-term care projects that we are working on, that we have worked through. And so we are very confident in that 2025 date. The initiation and planning stage is 3 months. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done during that stage to get the prime consultant on board, as I mentioned, to review the background studies for both sites. But that is a very representative time frame of how long we think it will take to go out to the RFP, to evaluate, to make a recommendation and have it approved. The 16-month period for design, development, and tendering is going to require a lot of decisions from both homes to be made. We are willing and able to drive that forward. But as you can expect during the design development stage, all of the end user groups are going to need to provide detailed input for the requirements of their space, all the way down to specifying the color of the wall, the type of flooring, the type of controls. And so it will be an intensive period, but it is very realistic and reasonable for projects of this scale and magnitude. And so going down to construction, 24 months, we're looking at 128 beds for both sites and running 2 concurrent construction programs. Again, this is, we feel this is very reasonable and realistic for a project of this size and scale, based on our experience and how long we've seen for these projects to be delivered. And then the 3 months for closeout, as Gary had mentioned before, that's really most of these deficiencies we are going to try and capture during the construction period, and we'll do so by ensuring the general contractor doesn't get paid till they do it. Those 3 months are really to wrap up any of the minor deficiencies and making sure the necessary documentation in terms of operations and maintenance manuals, record drawings, as-built goes across to the team. So we feel very comfortable with these timelines. There are some, during the design development stage, we're going to have to look closely at financing and the ministry approvals based on where you're at with your development agreement, but our team is very comfortable and has experience working through those processes.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew, may I, before I go to Christine, can I ask you a question, please? I am assuming that the general are bonded and main electrical are bonded too, or?
Sorry, I only caught about, I think I just heard the word bonded and the rest I didn't understand.
Were you asking if the principals were all bonded, Dwight?
Yes, including the main subtrades like electromechanical.
Yeah, so there's a requirement for specifically for the general contractor. There's insurance requirements. There's a bid bond. They need to submit labor and material and performance bonds. These are all very specific requirements based on your development agreement and what the ministry is expecting to see. So this would be yes included.
Thank you. Christine, I believe you had a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I won't take up much more time. I find this very interesting, and it's such an exciting time for Grey County, both within the corporation and but certainly for our Grey County residents, for certain. This question may be a little early, but it's just that you get us thinking very much when there's such an outstanding presentation. So thank you, one and all, for that. Is there a built-in linkage already for a communication strategy? So as the project goes on in the various stages and all the way through to construction and that ribbon cutting moment with our warden, I was just wondering, is there a tie-in that there is communication not only to Grey County Council, but to our Grey County residents? Thank you. Just in terms of a built-in process for this full project management. Okay.
It's a really great point. So yes, there absolutely is. As part of our project plan, communications is one of the sections we address. Who are the stakeholders? What is the message? What is the frequency of communication? We would be looking to work very closely with you and to understand what is the best format. And so as an example, we see some organizations work with a newsletter that's updated quarterly, and that will be used for the general public. They may use Facebook as a platform or their social media. With the resident councils or family council, it may be a different frequency and different messaging and type of communication. So we have seen, we will address it. We have seen a whole host of tools and ways to structure it, but we want to make sure that it works best based on your residents and your community. So we'd be working closely with you to see make sure it aligns with your requirements.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. Does the committee have any other questions of her guests here today? Mr. Warden, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think that the ongoing, well, not ongoing, but the always present issue of flat roofs, I'm sure that subject will come up at some point, but we have learned lessons from the past, and I've always said that I think flat roofs should be banned. There should be no flat roofs ever. but I'm sure that will come up later on. But it's always a subject of great debate and great interest. And I think we've had some learnings. Anne Marie will know very well from our last project there.
Perfect. Yeah, that I can just to close on that. It's certainly something that, as part of the design development process, that we'll be looking at in detail, and we will be leveraging our lessons learned as well as your team. So we're starting off with what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, and what do we need to do to position the project for the future. So thanks for that comment.
Thank you, Andrew. Madam CEO, since my internet is so unstable this morning, would you please read our motion that we have on the floor here, so I do not cut out?
Absolutely. Before I do that, I will just say thank you so much to Andrew and Gary and Jane for spending time with us this morning. Really appreciate your time and your comments. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure meeting you.
So
Nice.
moving on, Madam CEO, would you please take over and read the motion?
Absolutely. So item 4 on our agenda, CAOR RP 0721, award of project management services. The motion that reports CAOR RP 0721, award of long-term care redevelopment management services, RFP be received, and that the task force recommend the award of the project management services contract to Colliers Project Leaders, Inc. as the successful bidder for the amount of $899,000 plus HST to be taken from the redevelopment reserve, and that staff be directed to negotiate an agreement with Colliers Project Leaders, Inc. and the warden and the clerk be authorized to enter into an agreement with them.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Someone move put on the floor, please. Moved by Christine. Second by Scott. All those in favor, show of hands, please. I believe that is carried, Madam CEO.
Thank you very much. And I did want you to know that I did speak with, he mentioned the home that he's working with most recently, and I did speak to the CIO of Prescott and Russell, who did confirm a very, very positive experience with working with Colliers throughout their process. And I took a lot of heart from the fact that every person that they've bid as part of the project team does have long-term care and or healthcare experience with regard to construction. They not only provided Andrew as part of the team, they also designated a backup should something happen that Andrew wasn't able to continue. But there is also another project manager that's on the ground project manager working with the two sites. And so and the rest of the evaluation team, Andrew, Kevin, et cetera, felt that they had provided a really strong bid, and that we expect to be able to move forward with this project in a really positive way with their support.
We have lost the chair again.
Okay.
I can't remember, I'm sorry, committee. I can't remember who is the vice chair of this committee. Is that you,
Brian?
Brian?
I don't know, am I? I don't remember that. Do you want me to take, I can do this. I had a question.
Yes, and I see Councillor Mackey has one too.
Okay. Scott, you go ahead.
You're on mute, Scott.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Just wanted to thank, Kim and Kevin. I think Anne Marie were involved,
Yes.
but I was pretty impressed this morning with the presentation from Colliers. So, just wanted to extend our appreciation for the work that you have done getting us to this point. And I know it was probably a lot of information and a lot of time spent to pick these successful candidates. But this is such an important role that I'm glad that you spent that time to get it right. So I look forward to working with them going forward. So that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
It's
Can
so,
I ask if I could, the project manager or the Grey County's representative is going to be who?
So Andrew will be the person that you see working, coming to provide reports to this redevelopment task force.
Okay, so it's the project manager will be Grey County's representative. So there's no one from the county. So I just wanted to ask this. So the only contact we have with them is when they come to our committee meetings.
Oh, well, I'm expecting that as the staff team, so Anne Marie, Randy, myself, others, finance will be probably working with these folks on a very regular basis.
Which is why I wanted to ask. I just
Yes.
think this,
like it's not that hand it over and they run with it. That's not at all what I'm anticipating.
Right. Well, where I'm going with this is we just happen to have a chair with all this experience, and I'm just wondering if we could use Dwight more often than what our committee meetings, whether visiting the site or communication between you and just to have involved, because we're lucky to have that kind of experience on our committee.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. If Dwight's up for that, I'm sure that we can have lots of good conversations as we go through all of this. Absolutely.
no, I really appreciate that, and I would look forward to that. It's so frustrating to be on internet and not being very good, and it's such important discussions to have. And I keep filling out and most of the conversation, but a lot of it I am missing, and it's just frustrating to no end. But life will go on. Scott, go ahead.
Just further to Brian's point, I believe Anne Marie was kind of the lead contact for the county in the redevelopment of the county building. So would we anticipate, Anne Marie taking on a similar role for this?
No.
Okay.
No, Anne Marie is part of the team, but Anne Marie, I believe that Anne Marie is going to have perhaps some more of her own construction to be doing. We've got a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to our affordable housing please as well. So it's certainly, we want to leverage everybody's expertise, on the planning side, all of those additional studies and that were referenced this morning, that's coming into Randy's purview. So there's lots of work to go around, but I think the role that Anne Marie played in our redevelopment project is really the role that we're looking to Andrew and his team to take on in this project.
Well, I'm fine, Madam CEO, that you're deferring this from Anne Marie to Randy.
No.
Brian, I believe you wanted to make a comment?
Already did.
Okay. Well, before my internet cuts out, Madam, go ahead, Mr. Warden.
Sorry, I'm just picking up on the comment that Scott made about getting it right. I also think that we're getting it right in terms of timing. We had that discussion at our last meeting. We've got, this in place now, and we're slightly ahead of the curve, I think, because we're getting, good people, bidding. But we have to keep the ball rolling, because contractors are going to get, or the good ones, will get locked up pretty quickly. Everybody and their cousin has been given an award for long-term care development, it seems. And so the more that we can stay ahead of that curve, the better for us, because we'll get the better contractors if we can move quickly.
Good comment.
Mr. Chair, just a final comment. I guess I should say congratulations on landing a really good company. Like, I don't know about the rest of you, but I thought that was pretty impressive this morning. The fact that all three were there, and you know, they speak well, and I don't know if the rest of you has researched their website a little bit. I was poking around a bit there, and I'm really excited about these people. So I think we're off to a really good start. Thanks.
Yeah, they give you a sense of confidence, huh?
Agree 100%. Christine?
Thanks. I just feel compelled to also weigh in here and also agree. I really like the approach that that county staff used in terms of the addressing the project management firm that we'll be dealing with, having the firm come before our committee and make a presentation. I thought that was really fantastic, so that we get a sense of what this company is about. And also in terms of the outstanding presentation that they provided us and the questions that we threw at them. I think it was really important, and it also instills confidence. These are two major projects on behalf of Grey County. So I think we're in a really great place in terms of how these two projects are all coming together. So well done to staff, and we all look forward to the projects continuing. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. It'd be nice if we were using Teams since it works so good in George and Bless instead of Zoom. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Madam CEO, last comment.
Just thank you all very, very much. As far as next meeting dates, we need to hear from SHS and Salter Pilon, and I'm anticipating that we'll be in a position to have some further information from them towards the beginning of June. Is that, Randy, would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's
so,
based on the updates we received from SHS on the Greg Gables side as well as the Rockwood side, that time frame makes sense for sure.
Okay, so we'll be looking to set up that meeting at the beginning of June, and I will have a conversation with our project lead at the province just to let them know that we are moving forward with the project manager. Again, just trying to keep us in the queue. They were, I think to some degree, holding back a little bit on moving forward with our application, knowing that we didn't have that resource in place. So knowing that after council next week, hopefully that we'll be in a different spot, and then we can start to work with them and get things really rolling in a serious way.
Thank you, Kim. Before my internet cuts out completely, it's been a great thing, everyone. We know other business here today. I guess a motion to adjourn. Moved by Brian, second by Mr. Warden. All in favor?
And he's lost. Thank you so much.
That motion is carried. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
That's perfect. Look at them.
Great meeting, one and all.
Okay.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks,
It's
everyone.
a good way to remember them.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.